Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of The Boss. Har dafa ki tarah, we are making an effort to make sure that we have another very interesting personality on our show, people who've made a difference, our team leaders, and have been able to establish companies on their own or either running larger companies. In the end, before we start off, we'd like to talk to our new guest today. The guest is Mr. Jamal A, the CEO of Arpatech. Jamal, thank you very much for being on the show.
Good to be on.
Well, I don't know if you've seen the show, but the show is all about talking to people and sort of getting to know the professional excellence they work around. Tell us a little about your company. Before that, tell us a little about your schooling, your college. Where were you?
Well, I'm a Karachi boy, so I was born in Karachi in the 70s, early 70s, and did my schooling from here.
Okay.
And did my A-levels from Karachi Grammar School.
Okay.
And subsequent to that, I went to the US for my further studies.
Okay.
I went to Rutgers University, as well as Columbia University, and studied electrical engineering.
Okay.
And this was in the early 90s. And from that point onwards, in fact, in those universities, which were great research institutions, I got involved in this technology called the internet. And at that point, even HTTP, that's such a prevalent protocol now for us to browse, was not even something that was available. We were using protocols such as Archie and Gopher and things of that sort. And so my experience in those universities gave me the ability to have a pretty solid skill set, which was sought after. So right after school, I got involved in a startup very early on. And even though I was right out of school, I became the chief technology officer of a company called US Now Corp, which was based out of Silicon Alley, which is in Manhattan. It's around Green Street, Soho area. And the idea behind that business was to build rich media content for the web. And the revenue model in those days, if you remember, early 90s, was pretty much that if you had enough subscribers or users coming to a website, you would attract advertisers, and that was it.
That was new for people, but I think people sort of, really got into it.
Right, and people were trying to understand the model of the internet. So that was sort of the primary revenue generating model of the internet in those days. And we did well, and we worked for Money Magazine Online and Time Warner and built certain modules for them as well. But I sort of did a yang, there's always a yin and a yang. So I started out very early in my career with a company that was not structured, and went into a very structured organization called Instanet, which was a Wall Street firm, and we handled about 20% of NASDAQ's daily volume. So 1 out of every 5 share that was traded on NASDAQ was traded on our liquidity pool. And there I got involved in leading projects in migrating legacy trading systems onto this new medium called the web. And again, I was thrust into a pretty early leadership role, given the fact that I had a skill set that was not very prevalent in those days. So I developed some systems for after-hours trading that were leveraging internet as a technology to execute trades. And one of the issues that popped up, as a lot of folks would know within the internet, is security and non-repudiation of transactions. And what non-repudiation means is that when a trader does a transaction, can they walk away from the transaction?
True.
And say, I never did that $100 million worth of transaction. So we had to build some interesting security models. So I got involved in a company called VeriSign, which was a startup in those days. Had about 50, 60 employees. And it was a company with a market cap of about 40 million in those days. And I brought their technology into Instanet, and somehow, after working at Instanet for quite a few years, I got involved with VeriSign, and they hired me. And and I sort of saw the dot-com boom of that company as it went from a market cap of about 40 million to about a $52 billion company, and we grew from about 60, 70 employees to over 3,000 employees. So almost 4.5, 5 years ago, I said, I've probably learned enough to get myself into trouble. And at that point I said, let me try and set up something myself. So we initially started up a US-based concern which was focused in IT security, and we identified a niche area, and we developed some R&D facilities here in Karachi. And the idea behind that was labor arbitrage. We wanted to make sure we managed our costs more effectively. And we developed these products for that company, and it did really well, and those products are in production.
Arpatech is a sort of IT tech company. You've been working around Karachi, been last, 5 years now?
About 5 years,
But when you came to Pakistan and you were sort of thinking about the R&D company that you were running from Karachi, how did you find the people when you sort of hiring? I mean, it's a very important part of sort of running a company as a team leader. Were you able to get people who you thought would work around you?
Yeah, I think 5 years ago there was still a large pool of people that were not tapped by the market. I think the market has matured significantly in the course of the 5 years. So you have more of a human resource issue now. Yeah. But 5 years ago we tapped into some of the smartest people probably that we could get. Folks, 2 of the first 5 employees at Arpatech are now Fulbright scholars. Okay. So, we say we probably helped them get their scholarship, but, I'd say those guys were smart enough to get it themselves, but we certainly helped them in the process.
Okay, but the issue is now that we're facing with most companies, the sincerity of your employees or your colleagues. People sort of keep moving because there's so many companies happening now. In Karachi, for instance, have they been able to sort of go along with the company, sort of grow with the company?
Yeah, I think we have some of the lowest turnover rate from an employee perspective in the industry, and it's a really hard work effort. I think there has to be a strong reciprocity in this process. One should not always look at employees just providing some sense of loyalty without the company providing loyalty as well. Yeah. So we've been working, and it's still something that's not fully done, but we've been trying to think out of the box in terms of how we can keep our employees for the long term.
We talked about the team leadership part of Arpatech. Let me just get back on a break. We'll be right back on The Boss. We have Mr. Jamal A, the CEO of Arpatech. We'll be right back after this really short break.